Equal Education in Gauteng is launching a new campaign and releasing a research report on overcrowding in Gauteng schools between September 2019 and June of 2020. Equal Education conducted research across 9 schools in Etwatwa, Ekurhuleni. Equal Education collected data on 751 classes, measured and inspected 105 classrooms, and interviewed 51 school community members. But for more on the campaign and perhaps what has been unearthed, we're joined by Katherine Sunderland, who is Equal Education's researcher. Well, Katherine, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. And walk us through what the No Space campaign ultimately aimed to do. What is it about?
So we aimed to get a better understanding of what overcrowding is in a South African context. I think that there's a lot of misconception around what an overcrowded classroom looks like. And I think what our research does is it explains that overcrowding isn't just about having a certain number of learners. It's more about looking at how many learners there are in relation to how many classrooms, how many teachers. We're basically trying to get the GDE and the DBE to understand overcrowding better and to measure it properly so we can identify where the issues are.
All right, so obviously given the issues that currently, is found within South Africa's education system, walk us through what some of the data revealed, what has been unearthed through this release of the report.
So the big finding was that essentially the GDE and the DBE measure overcrowding inaccurately. They use relatively simple ratios like the learner to classroom ratio and the learner to teacher ratio, which means that a lot of the data that they have on schools isn't particularly accurate. So they'll say in terms of the 9 schools that we sampled, we found that there was a ratio of 30-1, which is what the GDE uses to say that those schools aren't overcrowded. But when we go into those schools, we find that almost all of those schools have overcrowded classrooms, and 74% of the classes had over 40 learners, which is very much against what the binding minimum norms and standards for public school infrastructure say. In terms of the norms and standards, you're not allowed to have more than 40 learners in a classroom, and that deadline passed last year. So essentially, what the report explains is that there is this massive difference between what the GDE and the DBE is reporting. 82% of the classroom buildings that we inspected had too few desks and too few chairs for the number of learners that learned there. 66% of the classroom buildings that we measured were too small for the number of learners that learned there, and 7 out of the 9 schools had at least 15% more learners than the school building capacity allowed for.
Katherine, we do seem to be having some technical issues as we're speaking. So if you can hear me, I think just looking at the No Space Fast campaign, you've highlighted the objectives and what it aims to do. What are you going to be doing with these findings? Have you submitted the data collected to the Department of Education at large? What has their response been to this?
So today we had our official launch, and we had representatives from the GDE be present and also panel. Their response has been quite good, actually. They've said that they are willing to engage with us and willing to work with us. I do think that the reasons that they've given behind why they're unable to solve overcrowding, which includes not having a big enough budget, they're not sufficient reasons. So I think that to move forward, there's a lot of engagement that is needed. In terms of what we're asking for and how to move forward on this overcrowding issue, we have 4 main recommendations. The first is that we'd like the GBE to develop and implement school capacity norms, which set a limit for the number of learners that can be in a school. So this is really important because Gauteng is the only province that has an average learner enrollment of over 1,000 learners. In terms of the other recommendations, we're asking for lower resource schools to be supported with more teachers and more support staff. We're asking for the DBE and the GDE to implement infrastructure plans more effectively and think about how they're going to be doing this in the future. So be proactive about it rather than reactive. We're also asking them to measure overcrowding better and to create a list of overcrowded schools in Gauteng and use that list to do targeted spending towards solving overcrowding.
All right, let's leave the conversation there. Katherine Sunderland from Equal Education. She's a researcher there. Again today, Equal Education in Gauteng launching its new campaign, releasing a research report on overcrowding in Gauteng schools. Again, highlighting some of the data unfolding between September of 2019 and June 2020. Equal Education conducted research across 9 schools in Etwatwa, Ekurhuleni, collected data on 751 classes, measured and inspected 105 classrooms, and again interviewed about 51 school community members. She was unpacking what some of the data emerged and also the recommendations expected here on 2, working alongside the Department of Education.